When you became the voice of the Hornets in 2015, I think you were the only full-time Black play-by-play voice in the league. Is that right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Crazy, crazy to think that.
And now it's just you and Mark Jones. There.
Well, Michael Grady kind of, I think he's still doing some
Oh,
Timberwolves
right.
stuff. I'm
Grady's
sure,
still
but
with the
Michael Grady
Timberwolves.
is
Yeah.
kind of still in the mix. He's doing a lot of NBC stuff and he's doing a lot of Amazon stuff.
Yep.
So the three of us, yes.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, there are a lot of analysts who are Black, but not play-by-play voices. Is that something that you kind of pay attention to
Heck
or
yeah.
recognize?
Oh heck yeah. It's to me, it's one of the reasons why I kind of feel like it's important for me to be myself, just because that's who I am. It took me a heck of a long time to get here. It took me a long time doing a lot of minor league stuff, whatever. And so I said, when I finally get this opportunity, I'm going to be my authentic self. And I've got a totally different background than anyone else, who's come into the NBA. And so I make a commitment to kind of honor that background. And so I use the language that, I'm accustomed to, that makes me comfortable. I don't try and sound like anyone else, and I want to give people a sense of, hey, you don't have to be a certain way or look a certain way or have the same background or have the same last name as everyone else. You can do something different. It's TV, it's sports, and so it's super important for me to be me. And that's a massive reason why. My dad, Black, he's from Birmingham, Alabama. My mom, white, she's from Washington, Iowa. I've got so many different things. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. I grew up in a school, same high school as Travis and Jason Kelsey, that was fully integrated, white, Black, got a ton of Jewish kids. I've been to bar mitzvahs, I've been to bat mitzvahs, and that all comes out in my broadcasting. To me, it's broadcasting doesn't need to be, the last thing the broadcasting world needs is another Syracuse graduate, man. They need people of the world. People can tell you about Nietzsche and Kierkegaard and Henri Matisse and, what the geography of Borneo is like. That's interesting broadcasting as opposed to, the technical aspect of television.
How does the NBA get to a point where there is more balance or diversity with broadcasters?
Well, like I said, it's super hard. I think that I think executives think that comfort is what people want. They want to turn on the television and feel like there's some sense of familiarity, and that just breeds the same. I think it's easy, to take, this someone who's got the exact same resume, Syracuse class of 1998, who looks like every other person who has, done the same kind of steps. But I think it takes guts to find people who are kind of outliers. I think that's one of the reasons why it took me a long time. Is I went to St. Lawrence University. I had a philosophy degree. My dad's last name is Collins. It's not Albert. He was a social worker. But to me, all those things helped me become the broadcaster that I want to be. I just think it's all about taking chances, and why not? I can't say it enough. It's television. Things don't have to be the same. It should be a creative outlet. So why not try for the most creativity that you can find?
Yeah, it is like obviously teams and networks make the hires, but is it something that the league is conscious of? Like, does the league talk about it? Like, there was so much conversation about needing more diversity with head coaches, but you don't hear it much with the announcers.
I don't know what goes on behind closed doors. I do know that there are a large amount of, the collection of analysts is very diverse. And I think that maybe that kind of tells people who are hiring that they're doing an okay job. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's a totally different experience being a play-by-play announcer as opposed to being an analyst. I'm the one who, asks the questions. I'm the one who drives the bus. The play-by-play person is the person who sets the tone. I think that's super important. I came into the league, man, at a time in 2015. I'm not going to name names, but there were two play-by-play guys. I wanted to talk to them and say, hey, my name is Eric Collins. I'm the new guy with the Hornets. And they immediately said, oh, go talk to the other sideline reporter. They just immediately assumed that I was the sideline reporter,
Yeah.
It's so rare, it's getting less rare nowadays. But to have different kind of faces and voices do games, and I'm all for it. Why not? Let's try new things.
You'd mentioned that the last thing that they need is another Syracuse grad. Like, obviously, the Syracuse is a breeding ground for sportscasters. You went to Syracuse, correct?
I went undergrad at a place called St. Lawrence University. I was a philosophy major there. I spent 1 year at Syracuse. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Were you in the broadcasting school?
I was. And, it's great. Fantastic for networking. No doubt about that.
Yeah.
I've probably had 5 jobs where someone who was in the interviewing room or pulling the trigger on the final job was a Syracuse person. So literally Los Angeles Dodgers, ESPN, when I worked at Channel 5, WMAQ in Chicago, when my first job was a news reporter in Rochester, New York. These are all directly hired by people who went to Syracuse. So I know what I'm talking about. Syracuse is fantastic for what it is. But way more of my career has been about Cleveland Heights High School in Cleveland, Ohio, and St. Lawrence University in Canton, New York, than Syracuse.